YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here. Yes, back in Total War Rome 2. I think I am approaching 1,250 hours of time in this game at this point, which is absolutely ridiculous. But hey, I love the time period, and even though the game was a complete disaster on launch and still left a lot of us wanting, you have to admit you love the time period and a lot of the other stuff, like I said, and it makes it fun, and I still like watching battles in it. But a lot of you have asked me, hey, why don't you still play some Rome 2? You know, that's your name comes from Carthage and all this other it's just the sheer number of hours that I have in the game, and I'm not like disgusted casting this or something. I don't mind doing one here and there. I don't feel a great desire to like play large swaths of the game at this point, but I'm not saying that I wouldn't like to show you replays like this. And who do I have today? I've got Sol Invictus here representing Massilia, and this is, I believe, tournament play between him and Wolf Olda, who is representing Galatia. So Galatia, their main line is made up of these Galatian legionaries. There's quite a few Levy Freemen, of course. You got to have the Levy Freemen. There's a few Celtic slingers, and then the interesting piece of the Galatian army is in the cavalry. There are two mercenary Cappadocian cavalry, one of which is here, and then there's one on the other flank, and then there's actually two noble horse. So very heavy melee horse contingent for Galatia. There are 6 Massilian hoplites, which are high armor, good charge, nice armor piercing in terms of hoplites. The main downside of any hoplite unit is that the attack is fairly low compared to a solid sword unit. They are supported by Celtic warriors and axe warriors kind of mixed in behind them. And the basic idea here is going to be to probably tank the charge of the Galatians with the cheaper units, and then grind out the fight with the Massilian hoplites, which is a pretty solid strategy. The real challenge for Massilia is going to be keeping the Galatian heavy cavalry off their flank. You also notice that something different in Total War Rome 2 is that the troops are definitely spread wide, and it's more to do with the mechanics of the game than anything else. In Warhammer, you don't see some of the same mechanics prevalent that you did in this game, so spreading out in this game had a lot of advantageous benefits for the player, one of which was missile resistance, the other was spreading your charge out, and then obviously spreading wider allows you to keep people from flanking you as easily. The downside is that obviously there was a bracing mechanic in the game, and there still is in Warhammer, but it doesn't seem to be as extreme. Thin lines would make you pretty susceptible to cavalry charges, especially shock cavalry. But these two players, the Galatian player is aggressively chasing the Massilian at this point. I'm kind of trying to do quite a bit of cinematic play here, though I will show you the two players. We get an engagement right here. Sorry, I have to get a drink. I got some weird stuff going on. Whew, itch in my throat. Yeah, we got an engagement here between some axe warriors and some Galatian swords. Not really what the axe warriors would really like to have. Out here, there's again some more engagements between looks like some Tarentine Cav, and let's just kind of see what all we got in this blob. Galatian Sword, Axe Warriors, and Tarentine Cav. A few of the main engagements starting, and again, as expected here, the Massilian hoplite is going to come in to dish out the damage while the Axe Warriors tank the charge, and we're going to see this repeated across the line, and this is a pretty good strategy, honestly. Massilian hoplites are quite beastly if they don't take massive charge damage. As expected, let's go into a different view here real quick. The Galatian cavalry is running behind the lines already because the Tarentine cavalry is quite light, and it can't stop this heavy cavalry. It can harass it, but it can't stop it from coming into the back lines. So you're going to see it coming back here to chase skirmishers, though one of the Massilian units starts to pull out, and then a hoplite unit comes to fend them off too, so the skirmishers are at least temporarily saved. What of the Massilian Tarentine cavalry, because there were 3 of them. One of them is engaged back here, killing some Celtic slingers, but was then routed by a noble horse. The other has been playing a bit of a cat and mouse game with some Levy Freemen that you can see off there in the distance, and doing a good job of keeping some of the focus of the Galatian player in the back lines. There was a nice rear charge here from the Massilian player, but then it was completely smashed by the heavy cavalry of the Galatians, so quickly putting an end to that one little victory. And you can see this Galatian cavalry lining up here, definitely looking to potentially shoot this gap and get to the juicy, sweet Massilian skirmishers in the back lines. And then you have a huge break here from the Galatian flank, so they're going to start really pressuring the right flank of Sol Invictus as Ulda moves up with his troops. You can see the Noble Horse did move through in the center, and they are pounding the skirmishers back pretty hard. There is a Massilian hoplite to support, though, fortunately for the Massilian. But like I said, this flank over here, the infantry fight's going quite well for the Massilian. The combination of cheap swords with the armor and armor-piercing damage of the Massilian hoplites is dealing the business to the Galatian infantry. But like I said, lots of trouble over in this vicinity for Massilia. But the good thing about a Massilian hoplite, especially when it gets into a phalanx like this, it gets a bonus versus large. Its defense goes up, and its charge resistance goes up. At least I think its charge, or its bracing goes up, is what I should say. So it'll take longer to kill it. This Tarentine Cav has done a good job all game of being annoying here. It accidentally gets kind of caught on the Levy Freeman, but it's going to continue forward. And it's got some great targets there in its sight if it's able to capitalize, but it pulls away because there is some heavy horsemen chasing them out. They should be able to get some nice javelin volleys, though, if they still have any javelins left. Overall fight, though, right now is actually, as you can see by that balance bar, pretty heavily in favor of the Galatian player. A lot of kills on these Galatian legionaries that are alive. I mean, a few have definitely been outmatched and outplayed, but look, 119 kills in this Cappadocian cavalry, 103 kills on the noble horseman, 167 kills on that noble horseman, and the other mercenary Cappadocian at 80 kills. So lots of cavalry kills for the Galatian player, and pretty good number of kills, say, like even on these cheap Galatian swords. Like I said, this flank is suffering a bit. These Massilian hoplites are now free from combat and should be able, I meant to use the blue there, yep. They can now kind of come over and engage in this fight, but they're about to take a charge from these Cappadocians who are trying to prevent them from reinforcing. Tarentine cavalry get a nice jab volley off there, damaging the noble horse further. And then over here, where the Massilian hoplites have managed to win the fight, they're going to now start chasing skirmishers and engaging cavalry. Like I said, though, I mean, the balance bar swinging back just a little bit here, and there is some key stuff, though. The noble horse right here is where the general of the Galatian player is, and a cavalry unit is a somewhat risky place sometimes to put your general. And you can see these guys engaging here, hitting some Massilian hoplites. But I mean, if the Galatian player loses his general at this point in the game, it's going to be bad, because the Galatian units do not have discipline, whereas the Massilian hoplites do. And it's going to definitely be a bad deal. So the Galatian player will want to be careful of their general. You can see, though, that nice use of the cavalry by the Galatian player. It's still racking up kills, being mobile, staying alive, and causing a ton of damage to the Massilians. But again, the Massilians here possess the heavily armored anti-cavalry type troops, and it will give them a pretty solid chance. Here's a nice little jab volley right there, taking the general down to very low numbers. Do not believe the general's yet dead, though. But the javelins coming off those Tarentine Cav, though, are taking their toll, and the Tarentine Cav has over 100 kills, which is quite impressive. Here the noble horse charges into some of the Massilian hoplites, so definitely being quite risky with the cavalry. I do believe, actually, that the Galatian general died earlier. Yeah, I think he did, because when I watched this previously, the Galatian general died earlier, and that's why a lot of the cheaper infantry routed out earlier. So yeah, the Galatian general's dead. You can see the balance bar is still a little bit in favor of the Galatian player, and it's probably because we have a pretty healthy mercenary Cappadocian Cav. I say pretty healthy, about half strength. Noble horse here, and a decent Galatian legionary with 205 kills. The noble horse general finally dies, but has 180 kills. Honestly, though, the balance bar right there when that noble horse left just shifted back into favor of the Massilian player, which in this case is Sol Invictus, and rightfully so. The Galatian swords, or the Galatian legionaries, can definitely do a lot of damage, and the Galatian swords aren't bad. And this Cappadocian cavalry is, you know, a force to be reckoned with. The problem is these swords, they're going to start, I mean, so a high armor, high defense unit with the hoplite phalanx like the Massilian hoplites have, it's going to be a tough nut to crack for these swords in the late game. game, sorry, in the late game because they're tired, they're exhausted. They don't have quite as much melee defense. You can see these guys kind of hanging their heads in exhaustion. And the hoplites are just going to be kind of like a brick wall. And the Galatians will try to tear them down, but they're ever tiring. So, and as their strength fails, so will their resolve. You can see here the Tarentine cavalry being used quite nicely to deny the charge of the Galatian legionaries that they so badly need to dish damage, especially at this point in the late game. And then the engagements are going to begin. Here comes the swordsmen, all trying to pile in on the Tarentine cavalry, but this just allows the Massilian hoplites to pile in. Nice charge over here, though. The general unit for the Massilians is taking a lot of damage from the Cappadocian cavalry, and it's even started to waver some. But over here, where these Massilian hoplites get into combat, they are going to start wrecking these swords because they didn't get a proper charge. And again, I think the defense and the armor and the extra armor piercing of the Massilian hoplites starts to really play a role here late in the game, not to mention the discipline factor. Those troops being disciplined creates issues, whereas this, you can see that unit there, wavers and routes, and that's it. So, I mean, very close game. Sol Invictus is going to take this one home. It was actually really well played by both players. The Sol Invictus, though, just kind of kept fighting and fighting and fighting. Like, even when his skirmishers were being harassed, he would pull back extra hoplite units and fight it, and didn't just give them up, even though, you know, in the end they ended up getting taken. Like, he kind of made the Galatian player pay for it slowly over time. So all that attrition kind of eventually wore into his favor. And then, like I said, I really think that him having the disciplined, high armor, good armor piercing troops in the end of the game definitely was great, whereas you can see that the Galatian legionaries were probably better at getting kills earlier in the match. Though, to be honest, most of the Galatian legionaries were denied the number of kills that they need, and you actually saw one of the better performances right here from a Galatian sword, who probably cleaned up a lot of kills on the flanks against the cheaper infantry units, but you know, you never know. It got 2 chevrons. Very nice performance from this Cappadocian cavalry. Probably a little bit under par for this one, but a decent performance from both noble horse characters as well. And 70 kills here on a Levy Freeman is great if you're taking home that kind of thing. 60 kills on a cheap slinger is also quite good. If we take a look at the kills on the side of the Massilian player, very solid kills on all but one of his Massilian hoplites. And then you can't complain about 80 kills out of a Celtic warrior. The Tarentine Cav here with 176 is total clutch. You know, again, picking up 2 XP. So really nice game here between Sol Invictus and Wolf Ulda. Nice matchup of factions. You get the offensive power and solid cavalry with Galatia, and you get the solid infantry with Massilia. But nice variety too. So Massilia has this nice variety of Greek troops mixed with Celtic troops. So definitely interesting factions, interesting matchup. Hope you all enjoyed this match. I'll be back around with Rome 2 every now and then, so stay tuned if it's what you enjoy. HeirofCarthage signing out for now.